Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hart for those of you that are new, and today I'll be breaking down the Thursday night football slates we have here on DraftKings, the showdown slates between the Commanders and the Packers for tonight's game. So should be a good one. Excited to break this down for you guys. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Check out my Twitter at HartDFS. I put up a bunch of different threads for you guys. I recapped the entire week one thread here, as you guys can see. So take a look at that. Kind of went through each and every single team, kind of what stood out going into week two there. Then for tonight's breakdown for tonight's slate, I put up a key usage trend for both teams, so make sure to check that out. We'll get into that in a second here, but make sure to hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, check out my Twitter at HartDFS, throw me a follow there, and I will have DFS projections out hopefully pretty soon. So let's get right into this breakdown. Right now for this game tonight, it is currently sitting at a 48.5 point game total. And then for the spread, it's 3.5 point spread right now, favored to the Packers. It's at Lambeau Field, so obviously a tough place to play. But right now, I kind of like the Commanders over the Packers for tonight's game. So, as I mentioned, $1 million up top to first place, so a ton of money to be won. You want to win it all by yourself. Obviously, that is the goal. So if you want to do that, you got to get it a little bit different. You got to be a little bit more contrarian and kind of hopefully, the chips fall your way. But looking at the top here, we have Jaden Daniels at 11K. It's just one of those things. He's an automatic lock for me. It really comes down to, do you want to put him in the captain spot or do you want to put him in the flex? Obviously, putting him in the captain spot is going to be probably the highest owned captain on the slate just because of the upside, right? Like, obviously, really good at passing the ball, and he has massive floor when it comes to rushing, 11 attempts for 68 yards in the last game. So he's just a very, very safe play. I just don't see the need to fade him for tonight just because he's a huge part, basically the main part of that offense for the Commanders there. So I'm going to throw him there in the flex. It really depends on how many lineups you're playing. If you're going to play, 1 to 3, I'd probably have him in the captain at least one, and then obviously the flex spot for those two other ones. And then going into kind of the second highest owned, the second highest priced player, Josh Jacobs, 10.6K. I really like him at this price tag. Obviously, it's pretty high for kind of a running back on a showdown slate. For a guy who doesn't have a ton of pass catching upside, he can, but we haven't really seen it too much throughout his career. But yeah, 10.6K for him. I think it's still a pretty solid price tag just because he is kind of the only one that who is going to get his looks on the Packers. The passing game, it's very, very random, as we'll take a look at here in 1 second. But yeah, when it comes to Josh Jacobs, I think he's kind of like a Jaden Daniels play for me. Obviously, the floor isn't as safe with Josh Jacobs just because, he's not guaranteed those targets. If he doesn't fall into the end zone, he could have a okay game, 10 fantasy points or less, but still, they're going to run the ball a ton with him. They're favored right now, so if the game script goes your way, he should see a good amount of rushing attempts. Really like him there at 10.6. Another one of those players I don't mind throwing in the captain. My 3 favorite captain plays right now are Jaden Daniels, Josh Jacobs, and then Terry McLaurin, who we'll get into in a second. But just want to cover Jordan Love real quick. 10,000 for him. Obviously, the only issue I see with Jordan Love is he doesn't really have a high upside when it comes to rushing the ball or goal line touchdowns. And just the overall passing offense, it can be a little shaky at times, especially if they're having a lot of success with Josh Jacobs. They're really not going to throw the ball too much there, and it's just more so like, who are you going to play with, Jordan Love? If you throw him in the captain spot, you're going to want at least 2 to 3 of his pass catchers. That obviously helps out. I think I'd rather go to that way than throwing him in the flex just because it could be one of those situations where he only goes to one wide receiver, you don't really know who it is, or he goes to multiple, and he throws up a game like this where he only goes for 15 fantasy points. It could be one of those things where he doesn't end up in the flex, in the most optimal lineup, the winning lineup. So right now, my take on Jordan Love is just kind of for me. If I'm playing only 1 to 3 lineups, I might have him in one, but I don't mind fading him and just getting to some other plays on the slate just to get a little bit different. But yeah, as I mentioned, just want to go over some key usage trends here for tonight's game. So as we can see here, Terry McLaurin led the Commanders in routes run. He had 29, only got 4 targets, which was a 13.8% target share. As you can see, Deebo Samuel led the way there with 28 routes, with 10 targets. He only ran 28 routes, so one less than Terry, but he got 35% of the targets. So they got him very, very involved from the beginning there in game one. Then you can kind of see the rest of the team here. Zach Ertz got 5 targets. Noah Brown got 3. Eckler got 3. Jalen Lane got 2. Moore 1. Bates nothing. Bill Merritt, he got 1. McNichols, nothing, and then Yankoff, nothing. So that's kind of the usage trends there for the Commanders. And then for the Packers, Josh Jacobs actually kind of led the team there in routes, tied with Romeo Doubs, 16. Only got targeted once. Doubs had 4 targets, 4 for Tucker, 2 for Golden. Jaden Reed had 5, Wicks with 2, and then Fitzpatrick 1, Luke 1, Chris Brooks 1, and Savion Williams 1. So the standout for me in terms of both of these teams was, one, obviously Deebo Samuel was very involved in week 1. I expect that to drop, and for Terry McLaurin's target percent to rise dramatically. Zach Ertz is just kind of a safe play there. Like, once they get into the red zone, he's a key red zone target for Jaden McDaniels, so he's always pretty safe there. And in terms of kind of the secondary options, I do really like Noah Brown there. Ran 19 routes, saw 3 targets, so he should get some looks here in tonight's game. And that's really it for me in terms of this backfield. In terms of the wide receivers in the backfield. And then for the Packers side, Josh Jacobs, really nice seeing him run 16 routes. Hopefully he gets a couple more targets out of the backfield. And then Romeo Doubs, I really like him there. He's pretty cheap priced on this slate, as we'll see here in a second. Kraft, nice to see him involved there. Golden, kind of disappointing for a rookie who they drafted in the first round there. Very hyped up. Expect that routes number to go up, but 13 with only 2 targets is a little bit concerning because Jaden Reed ran 1 less route, 12, and they got 5 targets. So he was targeted massively there for that last game. And then Wicks saw some targets as well. So in terms of the wide receiver room, as I mentioned, like, they're going to spread out the ball there. It's really tough to kind of, focus on one, because last week it was Jaden Reed seeing 41% of the targets. And then tonight it could be Romeo Doubs, or it could be one of those things where Wicks has a good game and he sees most of the targets. It just, it's a crapshoot there in terms of the wide receiver room for the Packers. That's why it just makes it a little bit harder for me to kind of personally like Jordan Love. But it's also one of those things, as I said, it makes him a good captain play, because if you throw him in the captain spot, you can take a shot on 2 to 3 different wide receivers or tight ends for the Packers there, and it's going to work out, because if he's the most optimal, that means he's going to get a ton of passing yards, a ton of passing touchdowns, maybe even a rushing touchdown. But a lot of those guys are going to have solid games where it helps them pay it off. But kind of hopping on back over here to the price points. Terry McLaurin, $9,000. I love it here, as I mentioned. Ran the most routes, did not get too much of the targets, as you guys can see here. We'll switch back. Only 13.8% of the targets there. Expect that number to jump up massively. He didn't practice for most of the training camp. Obviously, held out. First game back, nice to see him lead the team in routes. Only had 4 targets, 2 catches, 27 yards. Once again, expect that number to jump up massively. My favorite captain play on the slate for tonight's game. So I'll throw him in there. And then for the kind of the rest of the guys here, 8.6 for Deebo Samuel, as I mentioned, was heavily involved there week 1, 35.7% target share percent. He did get a rushing attempt as well. But one of those things, for me, it's just, he's a fine play. He's definitely a captain play. If you want to go that route, he's a fine flex play. But for me, I'm going to fade him just because I'm only playing a couple lineups. And I expect that number to drop down. I don't see him, maintaining that 35.7% target share there. I expect, obviously, Terry McLaurin to see a lot more, and Deebo's to drop back down. So at 8.6 there, I think he's a fine play. Jaden Reed, 8.2, more of a stay away from me. Obviously, he saw a good amount of the targets, 41% of the target share there, but he only ran 12 routes, right? Like, that game, obviously, it was, I guess you could say, slightly a blowout. I mean, not really, but still, the Packers kind of had it in hand the whole game. But still, only 12 routes. You don't love to see that for a guy who's priced at 8.2K and in an offense where they spread out the ball to every single receiver. So for me, that's more so a stay away. That's kind of a single lineup player. Bill, 7K for him, I think is a solid option there. Obviously, he ran really, really well. 10 attempts for 82 yards. Had a touchdown as well there. Saw 1 target out of the backfield. Would have liked to see that a little bit more, but I think if they go to Bill as more so the running back or the rushing back, I think they're going to go to Austin Eckler as more so that receiving back there. So that's kind of the trade-off there. But at 7,000, I think he's firmly involved to see a lot more of the snaps for tonight's game. I think he's a fine play. And then Austin Eckler is more so that kind of contrarian play. Like, if you do think the game script's going to go where the Commanders are down and they need to throw the ball a ton, I think you're going to want to prefer Austin Eckler at 6.8K over, Bill Merritt, just because of that pass catching upside there for Austin Eckler. terms of, the wide receivers, the Packers, Matthew Golden, as I mentioned, a pretty disappointing week one there, just based off of hype and the draft pick position, but I expect him to pick it back up here. So I don't mind targeting him. It's not the best price at 6.4K, but still, I think it's fine. You got 15.4% of the target percent there for the last game, but I expect that number to go up. Kind of the numbers across the boards for these Packers, the routes to go up a little bit more. I kind of get into the 20s there as they kind of progress this offense. So I think he's a fine option. Below that, Zach Ertz at 5.8K, as I mentioned, very solid red zone target and kind of a safety blanket for a guy like, Jaden Daniels. So I think he's a solid play there at 5.8. Tucker Kraft, kind of the same thing there. He's probably the guy I have the most confidence in terms of the Packers receiving side. Saw 26.7% of the target share, 4 targets, 15 routes. I think he's a solid option. Obviously, when they get into the red zone, they could look to him. He's a good, yards after catch guy. So at 5.4K, he looks pretty solid. I do like the kickers a lot. Brandon McManus and Matt Gay, they look like pretty solid options in a very high total game. So they look good to go to. As I mentioned, there's always seems to be at least one, if not both, kickers in a winning lineup for the past few years. The defenses, I don't love them. 4.8K for the Packers, 4.4 for the Commanders. They had solid games last games. 9 fantasy points for the Commanders. It was 10 for the Packers. But in a high-scoring game, you really need them to get a defensive touchdown. Otherwise, it's just not going to pay off for you guys. And in terms of kind of these value plays here for the wide receiver room, I really like Romeo Doubs at 4,000 there. Wicks is fine at 3.6, but for $400 more, why not go to Doubs, a guy who ran 16 routes, led the team in routes, saw 4 targets, over a guy like Wicks who only saw 9 routes to their 2 targets. Like, sure, could the routes go up for Wicks? Yes, but I'm going to take the safer play there in Doubs at 4,000 in terms of value. But once again, Wicks could be an interesting pick, a contrarian pick. Noah Brown there for the Commanders, 3.2K. Let's look at him real fast. As I mentioned, 19 routes on him, 3 targets. I think it's pretty solid there for a value guy at 3.2. McNichols and Luke Musgrave. If we look on the McNichols side, he ran 3 routes, didn't get a target, didn't get really involved much in the running game either. So he's kind of a fade for me. And Musgrave, kind of the same thing, 2 routes, 1 target. If you want to look to get very, very contrarian, maybe he runs that route. Luke runs that route in the red zone, gets a touchdown. Sure, he could pay it off at 2.4K. I don't think you need to get that different on the slate. And then if you do think the Packers are going to lose or if they're going to be down a lot of this game, you could take a shot on a guy like Emmanuel Wilson as kind of that more so pass catching back out of the backfield for the Packers. Could he get you 10 fantasy points? I think it's in the realm of possibilities, but I do think that there's still more reliant on Josh Jacobs, even if they do go down, even though Josh Jacobs isn't that good of a pass catching back. I think he's better than what most people give him credit for, but still, I think the Pack would rather stay with him, even if they are down, than a guy like Emmanuel Wilson. But once again, if you're looking to get contrarian, if you think the game script is going to go against the Packers, he could be an option for you guys there. And that's really it for me. As I mentioned, Lane ran 10 routes, 2 targets. You could take a dart throw on him at 1.6. Rodriguez was inactive. Luke McCaffrey didn't even see a target or a route run. And then Savion Williams, 1,000 for the Packers. 1 route, 1 target. I don't think there's a need to get to that difference there. And that is a slate breakdown for me, guys. I hope you guys liked the video. Hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.